Hello, U.S. History. Welcome to another Varela's videos. Today we're looking at the first stages of World War I. So we're going to be looking at the Axis powers advance, really what's happening in the 1930s and how that actually leads to the first stage of World War I is what we're going to look at today. So it's almost like the first section of it, or in a way, part one. So we've talked about some of the dictators. Let's talk about some of their aggressive behaviors. So these dictators are going to turn aggressive. And the first one we're looking at with Japan, Japan is targeting Asia, specifically China. But if Japan has their way, they're going to take over as much of Asia as possible. Then we have Mussolini. Mussolini and Italy are looking specifically at East Africa, and they're looking at invading Ethiopia. And this is kind of a revenge thing, to be honest, because Ethiopia basically fought off the Italians in 1896 when they tried to take them over. So I feel like Mussolini and Italy invading Ethiopia again is almost like a revenge thing. And then, of course, we have Hitler. And Hitler talking about rebuilding what is now known as the Third German Empire or the Third Reich. And obviously, Germany here in the center. There's an area they're looking at specifically, which is called the Rhineland. And this is an area that had actually been given back to France after the Treaty of Versailles. It's an area that Germany was told to stay out of, to not allow their military in. This is France, by the way, on the map. And what will end up happening is that's exactly what Hitler will do. He will invade the Rhineland, a clear violation of the Treaty of Versailles. So, thinking of that action, what is happening with the Treaty of Versailles? What is happening with the League of Nations? And unfortunately, the League of Nations are not doing anything. Pause that story and let's jump over to Spain. In 1936, there's basically a military coup or an insurrection against the leadership of Spain, which was a Republican government, meaning they wanted a constitution. They were trying to get rid of the monarchy of Spain. Hitler and Mussolini support the group that basically is trying to overthrow this Republican government. And that leader is another fascist named Francisco Franco. So he is going to receive a lot of aid from Hitler and Mussolini. And what ends up happening is that Germany and Italy support this group called the Nationalists or the Loyalists, which are trying to really sort of overthrow this Republican, basically a democracy type government that was trying to exist in Spain. So the Spanish Civil War is 3 years, 1936 to 1939. And unfortunately, it's almost like a rough draft of what becomes World War II. And the Germans and the Italians use it as a way to try and test out some of their newer weapons for World War II. And in the end, Francisco Franco wins and assumes control of Spain. The League of Nations, seeing all of this happening, is not doing anything. Why? Well, part of it is because they don't have the United States. The United States never joins the League of Nations, and that really weakens its sort of overall standing. There's no army. There is no army for the League of Nations, unlike our current United Nations that has a group of peacekeepers. The League of Nations does not want war. In fact, nobody wants another war like World War I. So unfortunately, they're doing everything they can to avoid having another war. And if they do make threats, they are definitely empty threats. There's nothing the League of Nations can say that actually scares or intimidates Hitler. And what we now look at is what has been happening is what we call a policy of appeasement. And this is an important word. It'll be on your test. So here's your definition. It's basically forgiving a potential enemy in hope they will maintain peace. Everyone's going to give in to Hitler because everyone thinks if they give him what he wants, he will stop. And he will stop being aggressive and taking over parts of Europe. And we know that is not the case. So the League of Nations, which is supposed to be this group to end all wars, is actually not doing anything when another war is beginning right in front of them. So this Pogo cartoon is something that is just to look at, but it's very famous. I'm sure you've seen it, where Hitler kind of happily marching along. He's walking on what are called the spineless leaders of democracy, who are just letting him walk all over them, literally. And this cartoon is titled The Stepping Stones to Glory. But we're seeing here Everyone knows what's happening, and yet no one is doing anything. And it's unnerving, and it's also scary. What about what's going on with the Soviet Union? What's going on with them? We're going to get to that. Hitler decides that he will, once he sees that nothing happens when he invaded the Rhineland, he sets his sights on Austria. And again, this is another part of the Treaty of Versailles that was supposed to be honored, which is no more alliances between Germany and Austria. Well, Hitler just takes over Austria. The Sudetenland is a northwest corner of Czechoslovakia. Hitler wants it. He's like, I just want the Sudetenland. Give me the Sudetenland and I'll stop taking over places. This is when the Munich Conference happens in 1938. Britain and France both are continuing to give in to Hitler. They're appeasing Hitler. So much so that they go ahead and sell out the poor Sudetenland, this piece of Czechoslovakia. The Prime Minister, PM, of Great Britain, Neville Chamberlain, he's going to basically allow Hitler to take over another piece of Europe, the Sudetenland. And he says this quote, which has been sort of the burn quote of all time. He has created the peace for our time. So here is a picture of Neville Chamberlain shaking hands with Hitler. And he's like, see, Hitler's going to stop taking over places and we're not going to have to go to war. Yay, us. If anything, it's just the beginning. But the one thing to come out of the Munich conference is that Great Britain and France both say, if you touch Poland, it could be game on. Do not go to Poland. All right. Now the Soviet Union. Okay. So Stalin, if you notice, has been kind of quietly not a part of what's been going on in the conversation. Publicly, the Soviet Union and Germany agree they will not attack one another. And then in secret, they make an agreement. They both want a piece of Poland. Germany will invade Poland from the west. The Soviet Union will invade Poland from the east, and therefore they can each have a piece of the country that kind of sits right between them. So here's a funny cartoon of groom Hitler marrying the bride of Joseph Stalin and this Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact. Some historians say it's not an alliance because they're not really going to help each other, but let's be honest, they're not hurting each other either. And of course, Hitler can't be trusted. He will break this. So what is Hitler's plan of attack? Well, World War II officially begins when Germany will invade Poland. This happens on September 1st, 1939. This is Poland right here. So the German section is going to be located where a lot of the concentration camps are going to be built. Here's the Soviet Union section, because the Soviet Union will invade from the other side. Germany's path of invasion has been called Blitzkrieg or Lightning War. Germany wants to shock the Europeans, and he's starting with Poland. After the Soviet Union invades from the east, Poland doesn't even know what has hit them, and by the end of the month, they are done. They have surrendered. So Poland is a completely occupied country by the end of September 1939. So where are our alliances at this point? In terms of Axis powers, officially it is still just Germany, Italy, and Japan. We haven't talked about Japan yet. Japan is very busy in China at the moment. And I will bring up Japan when we talk about the war in the Pacific. The Allies, it is just the British and the French. And that is it. So that's going to be a problem. Let's jump to the following spring. So if this is September of 1939, what's happening in Europe by April of 1940? All of this gray area on the map is under German control. Here's Austria, here's Bosnia, Slovenia. You're just seeing everything get gobbled up. After Poland, Germany attacks Denmark, and then they attack Norway. And then we have the Battle of Dunkirk. So this is a different site, I know, but we're looking at Dunkirk as a city right here in France. There's Belgium, France. All of this represents the German army closing in. And here we have the English Channel, and then here's England. So May of 1940, the Germans come through Belgium and they enter France. They trap what was left of the British army in France between themselves, this orange sort of bubble here, and the water of the English Channel. If the Germans capture all of these soldiers, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of British soldiers, this war could be over. And what'll happen if you see the movie of Dunkirk, English citizens with boats literally sail across the channel and help rescue all of these soldiers that are stuck here because you can see it's massive. And what we're looking at is the private citizens who own boats working with the British military to get these soldiers out and back over to England. It works. That's why they call it the miracle. But the point is, this war was close to being over about a year in, well before America ever even gets started. So, what does that mean for France? Because that means the German soldiers are in France. Well, France is going to fall. The Germans, after Dunkirk, are going to move to Paris. At the same time, Italy declares war on France. So now we have this gray area coming into France, as you can see on the map. June of 1940, France surrenders. And this is a huge blow to the British. That means that France is basically out of the war at this point. They're on timeout. And the Germans occupy Paris. This is also a time called Vichy France, where the Germans are in charge of France. And unfortunately, France is not able to help. There is a resistance that's forming to fight against the Nazis, but this leaves the British all by themselves. And this is how the war will stay with France all the way until we get to another important role of France, which is going to be the invasion of D-Day in June of 1944. That's 4 years from now. So think of France as kind of on timeout. So what about the British? Hitler has a plan, calls it Operation Sea Lion. It's his plan to invade the British, but he's not going to do it by land or by water. He wants to do it by air. He calls it the Blitz. It's a Battle of Britain that takes place from June of 1940 until October of 1940, and it's constant air attacks on Great Britain, bombings, cities, the people of Great Britain themselves. This is where you see those signs come on that say, keep calm and carry on. The British survive. They go underground. They have their air raid drills, their air raid sirens. And Germany never takes Great Britain. This is a miracle also, but it also is a testament to the fortitude of the British people. And thankfully, the British can hold on because for the next year, they're kind of on their own against the Germans. And the US, as you know, we're not going to get involved until December of 1941. So we're a whole year away. But as of this moment, Germany is, I don't want to say winning, but they're doing really, really well, yet they fail to take over Great Britain. So I'm going to stop our notes here for now. Again, this is the Allies or the Axis Advance Part 1, but we know there's a lot more to go with World War II. So hope we took some good notes, U.S. history, and I will see you in class.